in the risk management and GRC world, I think it makes sense to look at, monitor AI and start to set clear internal policies around AI. You are going to find customers asking increasingly what your position is on AI, and you need to start to be reading about upcoming AI regulation like the EU AI Act, and make sure you understand how it's going to apply to you and start preparing for that.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Risk Management Show podcast, where we explore critical trends and strategies shaping risk, security, and leadership today. I am your host, Boris Agranovich, founder and CEO at Global Risk Community, and our guest today is Caspar Bullock, Director of Strategy at Axiom GRC. Caspar, welcome to our Risk Management Show podcast today.
Thanks, Boris. Good to be here.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. So I believe that we will have a very serious conversation on the topic of how businesses can build the resilience amid riskflation, what they call it, and about the trends shaping compliance across sectors. But before that, Caspar, could you tell us a short story about yourself, your career path, and what brought you to where you are right now, and what you guys, what you guys at Axiom GRC are up to these days?
Yeah, sure. Well, Boris, thanks for inviting us onto the show. It's good to be here. By way of a personal background, my background has been in corporate strategy and M&A. I have experience working across a number of businesses involving FTSE 100 information services companies like Informa PLC. And then about 7 years ago, I am the current CEO of Axiom GRC, saw the opportunity of building a leader in the governance, risk and compliance universe. We saw an opportunity to build a comprehensive platform which span as many compliance and risk management areas as possible, and sought to make compliance easy for small, medium-sized businesses all the way up to large global enterprises. So my background is in business and strategy, and our focus at Axiom GRC is to grow an international leader in governance, risk and compliance software and services, which really help companies of varying sizes deal with health and safety compliance, cyber risk, data security, ISO standard conformity, and many different other standards, frameworks, and regulatory areas that companies need to stay compliant with. So, that's what we do, and it's nice to discuss risk and business resilience with you today.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Let's define the landscape, because we see hearing more and more the term of riskflation. What does it mean for businesses today, and how is it different from traditional risk management challenges?
I think we are seeing a greater regularity of issues. I think you're seeing particular riskflation, by which we mean the disproportionate increase in risk affecting business operations, but also the burden of responsibility on businesses to stay compliant with rules and regs. So both real operational risk, but also legal and regulatory risk. We see both of those areas increasing. In that context, companies need ever more, in a way that they didn't 20 years ago, third-party providers, software service providers, to help them navigate those risks. So, the types of risk are expanding, and the seriousness of the risk is deepening. It is not just regulations which, let's say, affected companies on the health and safety side in a hard risk industry 20 years ago, which are an issue. It is new frameworks which evolve into new areas like sustainability, but that's an interesting topic that we can come to, which are new requirements, new standards, which companies didn't face 20 years ago. So the nature of frameworks and the regulatory drivers are broadening. And then, as I mentioned, the seriousness of them is deepening. The ability of cyber breaches to disrupt a company's complete operations, as you've seen with supermarkets in the UK recently with M&S, is the kind of scale that you haven't seen before. And why is it so dangerous? It's so dangerous because people's digital presence is far greater, and e-commerce plays a bigger role in businesses' operations. So if you are digitally compromised, the scale of that risk is greater. So not only are the areas of risk and types of regulatory and operational risk going wider, the potential for them to really impact business operations is going deeper as well, and that tracks the level of digitization amongst other things in the world today.
Mm-hmm. All right. So yeah, as you said, it's not just about avoiding penalties, but also about building resilience. How do you see the relationship between robust compliance programs and the company's ability to withstand shocks and disruption, whether they are geopolitical, economic, or technological?
Well, it's all in the preparation phase. So it is, if companies have dedicated departments, if they are larger, who are able to put together very stringent and rigorous protocols for action that deal with various shock factors, they're going to be in a better position to then follow those protocols and steps when those shock factors arrive. So it's all in the preparation phase, and it's in the mapping of the risks and controls that a company spends time on, which will enable it to withstand them. It's easier perhaps for larger companies who have budgets who can allocate good levels of money towards building resilient platforms, bringing in market-leading risk management software and in-house expertise. Where it's harder is for the smaller customers, the SMEs that we serve, not just in the UK and around the world. They tell us, they don't have the resources or the necessary expertise inside to comply, let's say with the EU Cyber Resilience Act, or the Digital Operational Resilience Act, which came into effect in 2025. So there's a disproportionate ability for larger companies to allocate resources and budget to being resilient. It is more difficult for smaller businesses. So smaller businesses look to outsource this to a cost-effective third party who can make this very simple for them. That's actually what we try to do at Axiom GRC. We make compliance really simple and easily accessible. So it's all in the preparation, it's all in the expertise, it's all in the data, it's all in the transparency of your step-by-step plan to deal with different risks and have a control program around them as and when they appear. But unfortunately, it's a little bit unfair on the smaller players in the market who just don't have the budget sometimes or the expertise in-house to deal with shock factors that you identified.
Mm-hmm. So, Caspar, I would like to ask you a personal point of view. What are the major misconceptions in this field that you are developing the software and that you kind of strongly disagree with?
Repeat that, Boris. The misconceptions around what?
about the field of resilience that you are developing in your software, that what you see in the practice, what are the kind of misconceptions that you strongly disagree with?
I think the main misconception is probably that risk management and compliance is a tick box exercise and doesn't have a return on investment. I think that is a misconception. I think if you look at the biggest areas of risk affecting companies, you can, I keep coming back to cybersecurity and data breaches, you can quite quickly point to return on investment by averting crises that you are seeing affect lots of companies around the world today. So the biggest misconception is the inability to prove the cost effectiveness of compliance programs and regimes. We are pointing towards the necessity increasingly of having proper risk controls and compliance programs and software products being used to help stay compliant with stringent legislation and resilient against risk factors in the market. And we're realizing now, I think increasingly, that customers are starting to understand the financial benefit of investing in resilience now, because they see the mistakes of people who haven't. I think it is fair to say not every area of risk management or compliance is equal in terms of its P&L benefit or its risk of non-conformity. I think people recently have probably overestimated or felt that they overestimated certain elements of the sustainability agenda and have struggled to put costs, reliable cost benefits to investment in those areas. That doesn't happen to necessarily be my view, but I think there is a pushback on the ROI argument of certain adherence programs to certain sustainability directives. And I think that's compounded by when you see the EU slightly water down, the CSRD, directives. So if you are in the market, if you're working in sustainability and you're trying to make an argument for greater budget to go to these areas, it doesn't help you when the bureaucracy starts to water down those very same directives. However, as I said, certain other areas of risk management are very clearly demonstrating ROI. So I like to chat about the misconceptions around the market and around what areas merit what levels of attention. But those are a couple of examples of where there are changes in perception of different areas of resilience and risk management.
Mm-hmm. Yes, certainly we heard about a lot of greenwashing kind of exercises in major companies, and now it's kind of pushback mostly from United States, also from Europe. But can you tell us more about the kind of supply chain and third-party risk, because we kind of dealing with this more and more on a granular basis?
So, I think what's interesting is, yes, I think, let's say, some of the softer elements of the sustainability agenda, which are harder to quantify, have been sidelined in the US market, not completely. And there's lots and lots of voluntary disclosure still going on, and still lots of elements of mandatory disclosure going on. And the EU, Europe, has also followed suit to try and reduce some of the regulation around that to help the growth agenda as they see it. In areas like third-party risk, actually we see great ongoing demand for assistance in those areas, because it's not just about necessarily scope-free emissions data and quantifying everything your supply chain is doing from a carbon footprint perspective, some of which is very hard to calculate. But it is absolutely also about tracking the qualifications, accreditations, suitability of your supply chain to be a credible partner on a project that you're on. So third-party risk management extends wider than the environmental aspects or the social aspects of your supply chain, and much more into the operational suitability of your third-party contractors or suppliers that you work with, and that goes to business. So therefore, it's a bit more insulated and protected as an area that companies like to focus on, because it goes, it can disrupt your operations. So you want to make sure that if you're dealing with a supplier, let's say from a country you're not familiar with, or who you've never dealt with, you want to absolutely make sure that they have the licenses to operate. You don't do so just from the perspective of being a good citizen necessarily. You do so from the perspective of operational constancy and reliability. So that's why areas like supply chain management are seeing, I think, ongoing demand and growth, because they stretch beyond, let's say, certain other areas of ESG, which have come under more pressure, let's say, with new governments coming in and slightly changing the focus and priorities.
Mm-hmm. All right. So given the rapid pace of change and the expanding the risk landscape, what is one piece of advice you would give to a business leader who wants kind of build a more resilient organization and stay ahead of emerging trends in the next 1 or 2 years?
Well, I think they need to invest in their data. So they need to be collecting internal data really rigorously, which helps them prove their compliance and audit trail. So, they're very growth focused, obviously a small company, but it's important to have an eye on the data you're collecting. From another perspective, they need to think across multiple different risk areas. So they need to be thinking not just about, cyber risk, but they need to be thinking about, data security. They need to be thinking about AI system governance. They need to still be thinking about mandatory ESG reporting. They need to be thinking about health and safety. So they need to coordinate across multiple areas of risk management from an earlier stage than they did before. Maybe they only hear about cybersecurity on the news, but the risk management process stretches across multiple different disciplines. So invest in your data earlier and map every form of risk that could affect your business, and make sure, probably earlier than you would have, that you hire dedicated internal resource to oversee that department.
All right, fantastic. So if we summarize our interview for someone who is listening and would like to walk away with 1 or 2 major takeaways, what would that be?
That's a broad question, Boris. Can you guide me any further, or well, look, I think I would say in the world that we operate in the risk management and GRC world, I think it makes sense to look at, monitor AI, and start to set clear internal policies around AI. You are going to find customers asking increasingly what your position is on AI, and you need to start to be reading about upcoming AI regulation, like the EU AI Act, and make sure you understand how it's going to apply to you, and start preparing for that. Secondly, a key takeaway that I think is really immediate and needs to be dealt with is you need to find a cyber partner if you don't have one. I think cyber risk is one of the biggest challenges facing businesses. Everyone is being fished for, attempted hacks on, and I think if you don't already, you need to be seeking a cyber risk management partner who can help be proactive and enhance your security as soon as possible. Because if you have any form of a digital presence and are not in solely the bricks and mortar world of business, you can quickly have all operations, stopped in their tracks. So get to grips with AI and find yourself a cyber risk partner would be my two key takeaways for this space.
All right, fantastic. And so that's were all my questions, Caspar. If I forgot to ask you something that you feel is important to our audience, please go ahead.
No, I think that's good, Boris. I think you asked some really good questions.
All right, then I will. I wish you a great success, and also to you personally and your company, Axiom GRC, and hope to see you guys on our platform at Global Risk Community, and maybe next podcast interview, or if you have some people who post articles, you are welcome to post on our site as well.
I appreciate it, Boris.